We always like to start our meetings with the reading of our mission statement. And for this evening, our newly healed COVID member, Gretchen, will be reading our mission statement.
All right. WiVLA's mission is to provide an inspiring forum for women to explore and advance their creative development, to promote their work in the marketplace, and to infuse the community with their spirit of cooperation and invention.
Thank you. I have an amen. Okay. Gail, there you are. Gail, would you like to introduce new members and guests? It looks like we have some.
Well, I see a number of guests. I don't see any of the new members that are on my list, but let's start by saying hello to Fran. If you would unmute yourself and tell us a little about yourself. Unmute. You got to unmute.
I'm doing that. I'm Fran Sanders. I'm the director of public poetry. And Cait has read for public poetry. So we do a monthly library reading series on Zoom the first Saturday of every month. And I'm currently also working on Real Poetry, which is a video poetry, film poetry festival that happens the last weekend of February. So this will be for February 2023. And Margot has participated, as has Carolyn Dahl, in that festival for several years. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we're really happy to have you with us tonight. Let's see. And then there's Keegan Wheat. Can you unmute, Keegan, and tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Keegan Wheat. Hi, Cait. I had Cait as a professor a while ago. So I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you. Let's see. Buffalo Sean. I like your name.
Hello. Yes, I am the interloper for sure. But I know Cait from Boldface Conference back in the day, which is coming up again in about a week or so. And so I'll be back to hanging out at U of H. But I had seen that she had posted this on Facebook and was happy to throw it to our members over at Writers Lunch. We hold a weekly Zoom with free things for writers and stuff like that. So glad to join you guys. Thank you for throwing this.
Well, we're happy to have you with us. Is it Russanne? Is that how you say your name? You're muted. There
yes, you got it. Russanne,
Good,
combination
good.
Russell and Ann, mother, father, right? I'm not a new member. I've been a member for a long time. I just haven't participated much.
Oh, well, it's good to meet you. I haven't seen you since I've been around for couple of years, 2 or 3 years. So good. Welcome.
Thank you.
And let's see. There were others who have disappeared. I'm just taking a quick look to see if anybody reappeared. And it looks like everybody else are our regular members. So welcome again to everybody. We're very, very happy to have you.
Yes, indeed. Okay. I do not see our visual chairperson. So let me just say, Eliza wanted to remind everyone that is interested in participating in the virtual gallery that we need 2 visual artists and, well, you know what? I'm not even going to say that. We need 3 members. Usually it's 2 visual artists and a literary to sign up for the July-August virtual gallery. But, you know, if we have 2 literary and 1 visual, I think that'll work also. So if you have any questions about this, you can, first of all, go to our website and under events, and I'm gonna make my web mistress keep me honest here. Under events, I believe you can access the virtual gallery. Is that right, Natalie? I've only been to it like 100 times, so I should remember this. But you can take a tour through the current one that's up there now to get an idea of the kinds of content that our members are displaying. And you can combine, we've had members combine some short flash fiction with art. So it's really kind of up to you how you would like to display your work. Well, there's a couple things. On that page, there is a link to sign up. So you could do that, or if you have any questions about it, you can go to our directory and click on Elisa's name. She's in the first row of members on our directory because it's in alphabetical order by first name. So she would be glad to help you with that. Okay, special projects. As I hope you know, we have been working with the Orange Show on a piece of the mosaic wall at Smither Park. We've had some designs submitted, and there was some discussion about extending the design deadline. And I don't think I see Sally on the call. And she was going to get back to me. She was going to get with the Orange Show to see if we could extend it at least through the month of June. So watch your newsletter that will be coming out. Oh gosh, let's see. That may not be true. Where are we? This is May 17th. That's too long to wait. We'll put something on our Facebook member page if the deadline has been extended. I have not heard back from Sally yet. The Orange Show would like to get some designs. They want to see that we're doing something. So they want to see the designs, approve them, or have us tweak them before we go ahead. We were discussing earlier, before the meeting started, that we probably don't want to be working out in the sun in the middle of the summer on this wall. So I'm hoping that we have a little bit more time for designs, since we probably aren't going to be putting anything on the wall until early fall. That's what I'm hoping. Or else we're going to have lots and lots of water out there. This is the year of our biennial collaboration. We need y'all to form your partnerships. So the collaboration is when a virtual artist and a visual artist and a literary artist collaborate on a separate piece, an individual piece of art that is then displayed in a gallery show. Our show starts December 1st. We would ideally like to have all of the teams set by the end of June, mainly because you're going to need some time to work on your project before it's pencils down, I believe September 23rd or something like that, because we have to put together a book and get it printed and whatnot before the show actually starts. So if you have questions about collaborations, feel free to shoot me or anyone on the board an email. You can find all the names of the board members on the website as well. If you feel more comfortable talking about it. What I've been really happy to see is a lot of our new members have jumped in and have found partners for this year's collaboration. And I would love it if I would love if everybody participated, first of all. This year we have lots of space in the gallery at Lee College. And so it's a great opportunity for everyone to have their work displayed. So please try, reach out to anyone on the board if you have questions. What I'd like to do is at the end of the meeting, if you don't have a partner and are interested, when we share information about what everyone's doing, shows that we're in and so forth, that would be a great time. If you want to put something in the chat or raise your hand and say you're interested in a collaboration, then, we can let other people know, okay? Okay, and we've had 3, I think, in-person meet and match sessions where several people have found partners for the collaboration, and we may have another 1 or 2 of those before the deadline. So stay tuned for that information. Okay, Margot, would you like to talk about what's coming up in June and our workshops?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a teaser for June.
Okay.
Wait, I hear noise. Oh, maybe it's me. All right. So first, I'm going to tease you with this lovely photograph of the most interesting man on earth. So there's that. And then our June speaker is Anna Walker, the executive director of Lawndale Art Center. And she will talk to us about Lawndale and the future, including upcoming exhibits, programs, and ways Lawndale is responding to meet artist needs in the community. And she's a fairly new director of Lawndale. I think she's been there maybe a year or 2. So that should be very exciting. And then our workshops, I put them in the chat box. We have a studio visit with Gail Siptic on May 28th. We have 3 spots left. And I'm pretty sure we're holding those for members only for the studio visit. But the workshops are open to members and non-members, but members get a discount on the tickets. June the 4th, we have Hooked on Ekphrastic with Lorette Luzajic. I never pronounce her name. The editor of the Ekphrastic Review. We have 13 spots left. August 6th, we have a haiku workshop with Denise Bossart, and I will post that in the calendar this week. September 17th, we have the magic of contour drawing with Cheryl Rossetti. We have 17 spots left. So to register for these workshops, just go to our website, www.wivla.org. That's also in the chat box. Go to the calendar and click on the event, and then you can register. All right.
And just a word, if to get the discount, the member discount, you must log on to the website. Okay, so that the website knows that you're a member. Okay.
And I think I might have accidentally entered some things that don't show up unless you were logged in. So there's that mystery. So I need to learn how to fix that. Melody's going to give me a training session Wednesday. So yay. All right. So are we ready for Cait, or do we have something else to talk about?
I think we're ready.
Okay. I'm so excited. Cait,
what about this?
What?
Thursday.
Thursday?
Wait, can we
Next
wait till
Thursday.
Lee, can we wait till the end of the meeting for that?
Okay.
Okay, that would be,
Yeah,
that
I
was
just
what I
don't
was
want
thinking.
I don't want anyone to leave without a chance to sign up for the free tour.
Okay.
Okay.
No,
I'm done.
nobody leave at the end of the
Okay.
meeting. Okay.
Okay, I've got to work up my excitement again now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Lee, I'm just kidding. So Cait got her MFA from Ohio State University, and she got her PhD from the University of Houston, which I think was maybe last year. Or yeah, last year.
Yeah.
And I remember she had her defense of her dissertation was on Zoom. And oh my God, that was so much fun to hear her read some of her poetry and all that. And I'm going to embarrass her for a minute. I met Cait during the lockdown. I have been taking a ton of her classes in mainly flash nonfiction, some poetry. I've gotten some things published. And so besides being a great teacher, taking her class kept me out of some very dark holes during the pandemic. And so I absolutely love her to death. If you don't love her after the presentation, I cannot be your friend. So, Cait, Weiss, Orcutt, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. Having you in those classes kept me out of a deep hole too. So thank you. I got very lucky in that I happened to move. So I left Houston. I'm now living in Ohio. And I left Houston about 2 months before the pandemic happened. And the pandemic is horrible, but what it meant was everyone moved online. And so I was able to keep teaching all my favorite Houston people, because Imprint kept hiring me and Grackle and Grackle kept hiring me, and I was in Zooms with my dissertation advisors. There was no real problem. So it was really, it really became, I think for many of us, we understand this, it became a world, right? To be able to get in touch with these people from your office or your computer. Well, thank you for having me. I do have a PowerPoint, which I'm delighted to have Keegan in the audience. Keegan knows me as a teacher, and Keegan could tell you I never do PowerPoint, so hopefully this will still work. It's been a little while, and if it doesn't work, we will come up with a workaround. So can someone tell me, can you see this? Hold on, sorry, you're going to see me be a little bit befuddled. I'm going to share my screen. And then what I'm going to do is see if we can get this to work.
You're golden.
All right. It looks like it's happening. Fantastic. All right. So what I am going to talk about today, and hopefully rope you all into, is writing your story and then sharing it, how to stop doubting and start making art. So when Margot asked me if I'd be interested in talking at WiVLA, I said yes, of course. And partly that's because of my work with Boldface, the Boldface conference at UH. So I know of WiVLA because they have been one of the organizations that's taken a table at our book fair, and shown up and been lovely, and always inspire people to see themselves as artists, to become part of a community of artists, which I feel is so crucial to continuing to sort of like believe we have the right to make art. And not only do we have the right to make art, we're kind of, I think, put here to make art. So I was really glad to get the chance to talk about this. And I think at first Margot had suggested I talk about sort of writing a blog. And I was thinking, because I have done blogs and I've done a podcast, and I also have a book of poetry out, and I did a dissertation. And I also very early on in my writing career did bar reviews and things like that. But when I was thinking about, well, what is it really though that we all seem to struggle with or could struggle with? It's not so much sort of like writing when you already have the gas in your tank to write. It's kind of getting yourself to write or to make art when you are kind of just sitting in doubt, or who am I to dare to think I have the right to write? And I'll keep saying write, but I really mean any kind of art. Let me advance my slide here. I was, and still sometimes am, raised by a woman who was an artist and is an artist. She does a lot of pen and ink stuff, comics. That's kind of how she goes through the world, still telling her stories. And so it was very natural for us to make art in our house. It wasn't natural to think about anyone else seeing it. And so that was a different journey. But this idea of kind of playing and creating and writing, I think if you've been lucky enough to have it in your family culture, but if not, to put that in your family culture now, is this fantastic way to sort of get out there and express what's going on. So I put this quote here by Brene Brown: "What is risk It's when we are willing to risk venturing into the wilderness and even becoming our own wilderness, we feel the deepest connection to our true self and to what matters most. I'm really, for me, partly the back and forth with making art has to do with, am I willing to take a risk right now? And I think in part that risk has to do with, am I willing to put down evidence that these are my little thoughts, or these are my little loves, or these are my little joys? Am I willing to risk the time of putting something down, even if it's not going to be miraculous or transformative to someone else? Am I willing to risk looking stupid doing this thing? And part of the challenge, I think, is when we consider risk, it's often because we have kept the stakes so high. And I like to suggest that if it feels risky, to allow yourself this option of play. How can play come into our work to take away the idea of risk and make it more a game or an adventure? Now, when I think why do I get so up in my head about risk? Why does it feel risky? And it depends how in touch you are with, I think, the little sort of connections of your emotions, if you feel it as risk, because sometimes I just feel it as like, I don't want to, or I'm too busy, I don't have time. And a lot of the time, I think that what I'm really afraid of is either embarrassing myself, letting myself down, putting something on the page that it's going to make me want to cringe, that's going to make me dislike myself. That's mostly, now some people have other fears. Some people are afraid that if they write down what happened, that someone's going to get mad at them. And that's a different kind of risk. But often when I'm in this kind of artistic risk, where I feel like if I write something down, if I make a piece of art and it's not good, how am I going to live with myself? And so for me, this idea of risking it comes up and touches on this idea of what's good and bad. What's good art? What's bad art? And if I'm in my head about feeling like I have to make good art, it actually makes me make no art most of the time. And I think it's very helpful. It's been very helpful for me to look at how much good art is often art that has been shored up by power structures, art that has been kind of gate kept and curated in order to allow certain inequities to continue, in order to allow a certain perspective to be prevalent, and everything else to kind of be aberrant or easy to disregard or sentimental or overly fantastical, or everything else gets kind of pushed aside. And I think I started feeling this way when I first encountered feminist writers, feminist works, and works that centered women, and works that centered queer people. And then though, when I started reading beyond sort of white writers, when I started reading, and not just writers of color, but writers of color who were writing about writing, who were writing about craft, that sort of blew my head open even further. And I can recommend to you a Houston alum, Matthew Salesses, who, if you want to buy the book is Craft in the Real World. But if you just want to Google the essays, they're for free on LitHub. I think it's called 25 Notes on Craft. Fantastic. And he goes through point by point, and he shows how many of the things we think are just good writing. So for instance, a piece of fiction has to have a plot that moves forward. How that's actually quite cultural. And that's really a like ethnocentric fixation we have in the Western canon, specifically like male dominated, Western writers. and that there are complete other traditions out there that are open for us to explore and to play around with. And I love that, because I think when we can begin to sort of take the fangs out of good versus bad, and I imagine this exists very much in the visual art world too. That's just not where I've been educated. But in the literary arts, absolutely. You can start taking the fangs out of, is this good, is this bad? And allow yourself different ways to sort of organize what you might be doing on the page, and also what other people are doing. What other authors and other contemporary writers or even peer writers are doing. It's much more interesting. And so I kind of posit this question: how can you reorient your access of value so that good and bad aren't the polarities? And I was thinking about this, and instead of it being a kind of good to bad, what if the value system is more like a web or a sphere? And instead of good and bad, what if you have points like accurate, provocative, tantalizing, ambitious, transformative, passionate, soothing? Because I do think it's so easy to get caught up and to sort of censor yourself before you've even begun, because you have some script that probably a well-meaning primary school or high school teacher or parent or film school snob or someone said to you about what's good or bad art, when really that's so entirely beyond the point. And I think really takes us out of the magic of what it is to get to be creating anything at all. So that's been very powerful for me for getting over my own blocks, is again and again, and I catch myself doing this all the time teaching too, because if I'm using good or bad to describe something, I'm not really describing anything. I might as well say like barricaded and open, in terms of what I mean by good and bad. Like, this has been done and has been pre-approved by the system, and this is outside of that, as different places to sort of group my thoughts and allow myself feedback that's not so flat and simple as good or bad. And then the other thing I like to think about when I'm feeling blocked, and I'll tell you now, and just I like to warn people what's happening. So I'm going to talk just a little bit through these slides, and then I'm going to have us do a prompt together, hopefully, that allows us to play around and try some things a little bit different, because I do find that, at least for me, a direct path towards achieving my goal, as beautiful as that seems, can actually not yield written results. Whereas if I go a little bit elliptically at what I'm trying to do, I have a better shot of getting there. So you'll see that with my prompt. But one other point about sort of how to get excited about writing, excited about making, instead of just sort of like terrified or tired of it. When we think about what's good or bad, what's a worthwhile topic, I hear that a lot. I primarily teach creative nonfiction. So I teach a lot of memoir, personal essay. I teach flash nonfiction. And then I also teach a bit of poetry. Those are my two main genres. And I've taught fiction. But what gets me about nonfiction is there are people who feel like they would want to write nonfiction, but nothing really enormous has happened to them, or the enormous thing that happened to them, they're not allowed to talk about, or they don't want to talk about. And what continually surprises me about the pieces I read and we discuss as a class is that we are often the most captivated by the pieces where what happens is not nearly as important as kind of the way what happens, or getting to spend time in someone's mind. Getting to spend time in someone's mind is the truest gift a nonfiction writer gives us. And I think that that's also true with poetry and fiction. It's just fiction, you're obviously in a whole sort of imaginary world. And then in poetry, you're able to move back and forth between fact and fiction as you go through things. But what interests me about the hesitation people have to to write a memoir or to write a personal essay when they feel they don't have anything that is that extraordinary. To me, it's that idea of if you've noticed it, if you've paid attention to it, that is the love story, that is the plot, that is the whole romance. And I think we forget how much we turn things alive by paying attention to them. What I wrote here is what you notice is what you love. And when we act, it's this devotional practice we're engaging in because we're noticing. We have to notice to write it down. And I do think one thing of writing that appeals to me is that it tends to be pretty specific. It tends to be crisp. It tends to be paying attention. And I think that paying attention is what allows something someone's written hundreds of years ago to still sort of seep into my bones and strike me in a way where I could kind of be right next to them, having the feelings they're feeling. And I think what we're picking up is not so much good writing, but we're picking up that gift of love that's in paying attention, even if what's being paid attention to is, I keep thinking, I don't know why this keeps coming into my head, but like Gogol, the person turning into the nose, like a huge nose walking down the street. It's not necessarily that we're in love with this surreal figure of a nose walking down the street, but the details of it, being able to fit it into the cityscape, watching the nose walk across the big gray stones of a bridge and get sort of pulled over by a police officer. It's just so specific. We can't help it. We get sort of swept up into it. And of course, when the specifics are the smell and the taste of the Medellin cookies, you just kind of get locked into this. You can't help it. And I think that's kind of the transference we're giving. We're transferring the love that happens in paying attention from our own experience to the readers. And I say that because I think it's worth remembering. It doesn't help us to think, is this good or this bad? It's just, is this true in some way? Even if you're writing, I think it's Bradbury that has this story where doors don't exist anymore to the outside, and instead you go through portals, right? So that's not a literally true thing, but that idea of being terrified of opening a front door of a house and looking outside into a space you never go, right? That feeling of, I think after the pandemic, we all understand that, right? Like of being sort of pushed out into this outside world you can't control and don't understand. That's truth. And we all connect to that. And it comes through in that detail. And so I think, if you want to write, one of my big pieces of advice would be is just to let yourself love, like let yourself pay attention to what's out there. And again, love sounds really cheerful when I also mean let yourself really list in your head why your neighbor's gravelly voice drives you nuts. Let yourself luxuriate in all those details, because that is the engagement you have that kind of is your life that you're getting on the page. I think about this quote a lot. This was said to me, never be an artist if you can help it, but artists can never help it. This was said to me by my college writing teacher because we asked for advice. We said, how are we going to be writers when we get out of here? And his advice was, why would you want to be a writer? No one wants to be a writer. The only people who are writers are people who can't stop being writers. And I love that piece of advice because I feel like I would imagine most people in this Zoom, you're going to make your art. You're going to paint, you're going to write, you're going to do your, fiber art, you're going to do it. So whether or not people say it's good, whether or not it makes you money, whether or not it gets to be your career, it's part of how you move through the world. To not do your art, would be like to just tape up one of your nostrils forever. I mean, it would feel like you're only getting half the air you need. It doesn't make any sense. And so what we're talking about is kind of like, how do you let yourself do this thing that's kind of almost instinctual to you? How do you let yourself celebrate it? So I've talked a lot about sort of how do we just get to do the art? How do we get ourselves out there to do the art? And you know, I think part of it is lowering that idea of good versus bad. I think allowing yourself to kind of fall in love with the world around you, you know, even in its annoyances. And then I do think there's another thing where, let's say you do that, you already do that, you do all that stuff, but you feel like you're still very frustrated whenever you put something on the page. This is where I think about what craft is. So I told you Matthew Celestes has that article, 25 Notes on Craft, and his new book, Craft in the Real World. So we hear this term craft a lot in the writing world. And what craft, I like to think of it is it's sort of the tools to help you transcribe that emotional experience you have so the reader can have it too. I also think that craft it's a form of protection for you in terms of it gives you a container to put your thoughts and feelings in. And so, you know, if I wanted to give Margot a goldfish, I would hope I would have a plastic baggie to put the water and the goldfish in before I handed it to her. And so craft is kind of giving us that baggie that we can put the water and the goldfish in. And so when I say craft, it can mean a bunch of things. But for instance, it could mean science fiction. Science fiction is a genre, right, that has genre conventions, and knowing those genre conventions can help us with the craft of it. You know, one element of craft is world building. So how do I create a world that someone could slip into with science fiction while still giving it enough roundness that it overlaps with the world they live in, so they're able to make these kind of connections that makes the piece sort of resonate on a deeper level. Or, you know, another element of craft might be a form poem like a sonnet. How is a sonnet going to work so that the reader gets the kind of magnificent verbal play that's going on with trying to contain an entire robust amour in 14 little lines with a neat little twist at the end of the couplet. You know, or another one of my favorite forms that gets used that has its own little set of craft rules would be the found form, writing an essay as a recipe with a list of ingredients and the steps. You know, craft can also be things like dialogue or jumping back and forth in time. Craft is really interesting because I can tell you, this is a side story, but I do watercolor just for fun. And I've never taken a class in watercolor, and I really enjoy it. But I also very much know every time I do a watercolor painting that if I would take one class in watercolor, I would probably be saving myself every single time. Several sheets of paper that I've, you know, I can't really make colors that aren't brown and like kind of a green brown, like all of these things, right? And that's because I'm just doing what I want to do, but I'm not learning the craft of it. And so I have expression. I can get my expressiveness out there. Am I doing it the roundabout way? Absolutely. And that's kind of how I feel like writing without craft is. You can do it, and it can be beautiful, and it can be yours, and it can be unique, and it can be vibrant. Sometimes it can be so vibrant. But if you were interested in learning some of the craft, that's going to give you this kind of toolkit you can use to more finely sort of affect your reader in the ways you want. One other thing I'll say about craft, though, during the pandemic, my sister, she's a big crafter, and she got really into doing these elaborate Lord of the Ring enormous embroideries. and they're fantastic. But, you know, they're from a pattern, and she gets a pattern and she prints it out and she does it, and they look great. But then I was looking on Etsy because I'm trying to get her to do some free form embroidery. And I saw these pieces that are just wild, and they look like things are kind of sprouting up and fluffy and, you know, little knots. And I was thinking, what's the difference? And I thought, well, my sister has craft and it's kind of perfect. But these other ones have art and they're imperfect. And that's its own like magical wonder. I can't help it. My eye wants to look at the imperfections more in a way that's really generative. And so when I talk about craft and art, I think it's really easy to think, okay, we have to learn craft when we want to perfect craft. But I don't think that's the point at all. I think the point is to get a couple tools you like, and then to sort of use them where you like them and be messy everywhere else and kind of let the life get out onto the page that way. So just some, I didn't really give you my rundown, but I can tell you I went to undergrad and did creative writing. And then I took 8 years and lived in New York City and did journalism and PR. And I started my own social media company for a little bit, social media marketing. And then I really missed writing. And so I had to figure out, having a kind of a pretty busy day job, how was I going to keep writing? What was that going to look like for me? And so I ended up doing a lot of different community writing programs in New York at the time. 92nd Street Y, I did 2nd Street Writers, New York Writers Coalition, and all of those sort of helped me figure out what did I actually need to keep writing. And then I ended up going to graduate school and got my PhD. But I realized, you know, how can we bolster our creative confidence? Because that's what I was really, really looking for. Yes, I wanted to write, but I really wanted to be able to call myself a writer and believe it. I really wanted that because I was kind of writing since I was a kid, but I wasn't calling myself a writer. And so for me, partly what helped in that transition between sort of, you know, I'm a publicist who on the sly wants to like work on a novel, to being I'm a writer and a teacher, were these tools. So for me, deadlines were really, really helpful. And the way I did deadlines, and it's just, I guess, is dependent on sort of how you're wired, but I found it really helpful to have a couple friends. And I did do writing classes, but I also just made friends that, you know, every month we would exchange work. And I had friends that every month we would exchange and talk about it. But then I also went through this phase where I said to people, I'm going to send you something. I don't want to hear anything about it from you. I just need you to like tell me you got it, because I just wanted to get it out there. I didn't want to worry about revising it at that point. It was just like having this practice of making and sharing. And also too, these were friends that, you know, I love them, but I have friends that I would want for revision technique. And then I just had friends I wanted for accountability, and they're not always the same people. So whatever works for you, but getting some kind of deadline of sending your stuff out somewhere. I found that so invaluable. And many times when people take classes with me, or, you know, whether it's through Imprint or Grackle or my own classes, one of the main things they say, partly why they signed up, is just to make sure they produce work on time. So I do really some kind of deadlines. The other thing I think is really helpful is hide the future from yourself. Don't think about what's going to happen to the piece. Don't think about what anyone will think. Just write it true first. That's your job. Just write it true first. Everything else you can deal with later, but you've got to get that first version out, the way you're holding it inside of you. Just get it out, and then you can decide what to do with it. Another thing I think has been really helpful for me is reading new works and first works, I think. And so as much as I have very much enjoyed reading all of Jane Austen's novels. That's not going to help me write my first novel. And so the goal is to read people's first novels, read people's first books of poems, read people's first story collections. I find that is incredibly helpful. It also starts to show you, especially if you choose writers you love, but a little bit later in their career, it starts to show you how writers develop, and what can be in store for you, and sort of how many of us do begin by writing a somewhat autobiographical story. Many of us do. And that doesn't mean that's going to be the only thing we do, but that can often be sort of clearing the pipe for writers in their first major publications. The other thing I personally have always found really helpful, and I know this varied in my cohort. I had a lot of people in my MFA and my PhD who read poetry obsessively. That's all they did. They read poetry. I actually found I was much more able to create poetry when I was watching films, listening to music, going to museums, looking at visual art. So for me, I found really immersing yourself in another medium as a audience can be extremely helpful in what you produce as an artist. And I saw that y'all are doing an ekphrasis workshop, which is perfect, right? That idea of one form of art coming in and inspiring you and another form of art coming out of you, I think can make all kinds of cool connections happen in the back of your brain. I also really advocate lowering the pressure on yourself for writing. And by that, what I mean is, when I was really realizing I wanted to go back and write more, but I still had this crazy day job, one of the things I did is I just set 5-minute writing blocks. And for me at the time, I would do it on the subway, but it could be, waiting for a prescription to be filled, just 5-minute block. And I actually wrote on my phone. It's not the best. I'm a pen and paper person, but it was always on me, so I could do it right there. And so I would just have a notes file and I would write there. And then, every month I might print out everything I have there and see, are there any snippets I'd want to keep or do something with? But it's just a way of keeping things moving. I had writing described to me once as a pipe, and you want to get things moving through the pipe, right? So even if you have something that's not great here, you might have something amazing right here, and you're never going to get to this thing until you shoot the not great thing out of the pipe. And so it's just keeping it moving that way. And then the last little tip I like for bolstering your creative confidence is rewards. I'm a big believer in rewards. They work. And so whatever that means, maybe I know some people who it's getting a beautiful journal. I know some people who it's rewarding themselves with some kind of a nature activity, just doing something, taking a belly dancing class, just do something to reward yourself once you've met your goals, because I think that is really how we continue to do it. We have to associate this with good stuff. I mean, we know we want to do it, but there's so much literature and baggage around the tortured artist, and it's so unnecessary. We don't need to run towards being the tortured artist. If we're there, we're there, and hopefully we can sort of gradually get some more joy in our life. But there's enough black coffee and cigarettes. We don't need to build that into a reward system. Go on the merry-go-round every now and then for a prize. And then the next question that I was thinking of is, how can we nurture artistic communities? Sometimes from scratch, though. If you're in WiVLA, you're not in scratch. You all have each other, so you're great. You're doing great. But how do we do it so that we can all kind of grow with creative confidence? Because one other thing I do think is really true. So as a teacher, I have worked, my very first workshops I led were at the projects in Coney Island with teenagers. Then I came to OSU, Ohio State, and I taught undergrads. Then I went to Houston and taught undergrads, and then worked with homeless young adults in Salvation Army, and senior citizens at the JCC, and fifth graders and sixth graders through WITS, and then all kinds of community populations through Imprint and Grackle. And there has been no one I've met who I thought, we don't really need your story. I really wish it were more common for people who were not in dedicated academic programs for writing to write their story. The more people I work with who do jobs outside of being writing professionals, creative writing professionals, the more great stories I encounter. So I also think, just from the work I've done, I got my PhD in part in early American literature, and this idea of what gets to be recorded as history. How are we building the archive of our times? Whose stories are recorded? Where can we find this? How can we crowdsource a history that's actually more representational of what we are as a people, as opposed to just the people who have pathways to power? So I am a big believer in everyone who can finding a way to write down their story, and in some way preserving it in some way, whether that means sending it out to get it published, whether that means printing it out in a book and putting it in a keepsake box, but something. How can we do this? How can we continue to nurture the artistic communities around us? So, I mean, I think one of the first things is just to see who are the secret artists around you. How many people do you know who are making art and they don't feel like they can talk about it? And to let them know you make it too. And to nurture that kind of exchange. The other thing, you're in Houston, you have so many wonderful organizations: Imprint, Grackle, Boldface, you have Writer's Lunch, Write Space, you've so many there. Now also too, so many classes are online. So not only could you take from Houston, there's also, trying to remember, there's Gotham Writers, of course, in New York. I think it's called maybe the Loft in Minnesota. There's so many great organizations that you can always drop into. I have some. I'd love to have you all. We're going to be doing a poetry class in June. Also too, I want to put this out here because I discovered this. There's a free group that works through the Artist's Way. And it's fantastic. It's through Lumina Arts, and it's just done online. It's funded by a grant, and anyone can join, and they do it in these 3-month cycles. And it's normally about 100 people, but you do breakout groups. And I did that once, and that's fantastic. Another way to meet artists from all over the country, and just discuss sort of what holds you back and what might shoot you forward. And then the other thing is, go to these readings and art events, Lawndale, Brazos. There's so much out there for y'all. And so, I think one of the questions to keep us coming back to as we're thinking about how do we stop doubting and start making art is sort of why are we writing and why are we sharing it? I started this talk mentioning my mom, who makes these beautiful things and has always been a storyteller. And at the same time, she's never wanted to share what she's written. It's always just been for us. And I say it's always just been for us, but my sister is in musical theater. I'm a writer. So the stories continue, right? It's not just for us. We spent so many hours making plays on the camcorder, recording magic shows. So this stuff keeps moving through us. But I do think, sharing what we write is a really powerful experience. I've seen it in my workshops that I lead, because I think what happens is we carry this stuff, and probably why we don't want to write in the first place is we're embarrassed or ashamed of something. We're embarrassed or ashamed of something, and we're afraid that if we write it out, it will be real and everyone will know. that we're horrible or we're shallow or we're petty or whatever it is. And then what's fantastic is people write it out. And then for whatever reason, they decide, you know what, I'm going to share it. And they share it. And everyone else in the room connects. And everyone feels so much lighter and freer because now we know, I'm not the only one who thought this, or I'm not the only one who's been in this position, or I'm not the only one who's incredibly like bowed under by grief, or still laughing about a partner I've lost who, I just had the best time with once. All these different connections are formed, and we're not alone anymore. And it's just incredible what happens. And I think, the dream we talk about and what we really orient ourselves towards are wider publications. And I think that's great. I think it's really wonderful to do that. But I've had a book, it's out there, it's been reviewed, and I've also been in workshops where people have read something I've written and I get to sit around the table with them and they talk to me about it, and both are wonderful. So I think just, in any way we can share our stories, I really think that's, for me at least, that's a huge component of writing them down. So I did want to bring up one little thing before we go into our prompt, because it kind of segues us in. So, I was talking about play and how important I think play is to moving us away from this idea of risk, good and bad and risk, and, all of that feels so serious. Whereas play is just low stakes. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. And so because I'm really into play as a creative process, I also am really drawn to this idea of the speculative mode. So for those of you who read a lot of fiction, speculative fiction can mean a variety of things, but it normally means fiction where there is some important departure from our reality. So it could be in the near future. It could be like that movie Her, where there's sort of that computer kind of Siri that the guy falls in love with. Speculative. It could be, I read this fantastic story collection called The Land of Big Numbers. And in one of the stories, people go down to catch the subway and it never comes. And instead the city decides to basically close off that subway station and make them all just live there as a social experiment. And so speculative fiction can kind of be like near truths, slightly twisted. It's often not full on like high fantasy, but it can be. For poetry, speculative poetry can be, one example would be Brenda Shaughnessy has this book called The Octopus Museum, and it's all poetry. And she imagines a world in which octopuses are in charge. And that is the book of poems. And it's fantastic. But so it's sort of like tell the truth, but make it slant, right? So it's that idea of coming elliptically at something. And in nonfiction, speculative is really fascinating to me because that would probably be the genre you'd feel the most unsure. How are you going to bring speculation into nonfiction? It says it's nonfiction. Well, speculative nonfiction can be everything from writing a piece where the predominant mode is perhaps this happened, perhaps this happened. It can be writing a piece that opens with a dream that then goes into a memory. It can also be writing a piece of the way things should have been or could have been that weren't. What's so interesting to me about the speculative mode, especially when it's in nonfiction, is it often tells us the truest wish of the heart. And it's, to me, it's so moving because of the space between what it wants and what we know it got instead. So saying all that, I'm going to bring us into our prompt. What I have here are the opening lines of Angela's Ashes. And I would actually, if possible, love someone else to read this out loud because I can't see all the text. I can do it if no one else wants to. But is there anyone who would be willing to read My Father and Mother down to We Were Wet out loud for us? Any brave person?
If you
I can
have
do
your
it.
volunteer, please.
Yes.
What is that, Gretchen?
Yes, did you want to?
Oh, no, please, you go ahead.
Okay, all right. My father and mother should have stayed in New York where they met and married and where I was born. Instead, they returned to Ireland when I was 4. My brother, Malaki, 3, the twins, Oliver and Eugene, barely 1, and my sister, Margaret, dead and gone. When I look back on my childhood, I wonder how I survived it all. It was, of course, a miserable childhood. The happy childhood is hardly worth your while. Worse than the ordinary miserable childhood is the miserable Irish childhood. And worse yet is the miserable Irish Catholic childhood. People everywhere brag and whimper about the woes of their early years, but nothing can compare with the Irish version. The poverty, the shiftless, loquacious, alcoholic father, the pious, defeated mother moaning by the fire, pompous priest, bullying schoolmasters, the English and the terrible things they did to us for 800 long years. Above all, we were wet.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, I mean, this is it just pulls you into it, this opening. But the first move we have, my mother and father should have stayed in New York, where they met and married and where I was born. And I think that that's such a fantastic and unusual way to begin a memoir, is by the sentence of what didn't happen, what should have happened. And then, of course, we see all the misery that unfolds because of their choice to go back to Ireland. But what I'd love for us to think about is, how does should work in this piece? What does the speculative offer us? One of the gifts of the speculative is that we don't only get to tell what happened, we also get to imagine what might have happened differently. I was doing a little research. I'm going to be teaching a class about writing about loss and longing. And I was looking at what's interesting about loss and longing is they're 2 of 3 parts that go together to make grief, loss and longing. And the idea of longing, one of the definitions I saw is that it's longing for the past or for a future that could have happened differently. This idea of something out there that's existing, almost like a string universe. Like there is another universe where this is happening. You just can't get to it. And that feeling of distance that is created when we create the universe of the should. Everything that's peopling and populating that universe of the should is something we should be able to get to, but we can't. We are where we are. And this idea of every yes unlocks corresponding no's, and vice versa. Every no unlocks yeses. But every choice we've made has shut down other choices, other paths we could have walked down. But that's also how we got where we are. So I have a little thing I'd like for us to do. I'd like for us to just take 3 minutes, and I'd love for you to try to sketch out 2 generations of your family back to your grandparents. Now, if you are a very imaginative person and you already have some kind of alter ego or fictional character you work with that you'd rather use instead of yourself, I invite you to do so. But if you are open to writing about yourself, it could be interesting if you could write just 2 generations of your family. So it would be your parents and your grandparents, and write down who in those 2 generations of families ever made a move, a geographic move. And because the question I'm kind of playing around with is, what chain of ancestral moves is responsible for you being in the location you're in right now? Who got you, who got you where you are? And maybe it's you, maybe you're the one who ended up where you are, but you know, where did your mom or your dad or who, you know, if a grandparent raised you, how did they get where they raised you for you to get where you are now? And if your family actually stayed in the same place for several generations, I'd love for you to consider if anyone had a chance to move, or if you think anyone dreamed of moving, even though they didn't. So I'm just going to give you just a couple minutes to write down some notes, and no one's ever going to see this. You can write a messy, scrawl it out, but we're just kind of moving into the pretend just to see what happens there. Just gonna give you about 30 more seconds. You know, when I give, I think of these things as pre-writing prompts. So there are sort of the prompts that go before the writing. I like to think about it as we all have our brains like these stew pots. And I just put a big ladle spoon in the stew pot and try to swirl it around so new hunks of beef come to the top. That's my pedagogical style, mostly. All right. So now you've got different beef chunks at the top of your stew pot. I'd like for you to start a piece. And this can be whatever form you like to write. It could be fiction, poetry, nonfiction. I've lately become a huge fan of comic poems or poetry comics. So it's a line or two, sometimes a couple lines, and it goes with a big splash page image of like you would see in a graphic novel. So feel free to do that too. It can be part visual. But I'd like for you to start a piece with the construct of should. Using one of your ancestors, or you can use yourself in the piece if you'd like, or a fictional character. Blank should have stayed in or should have left a place. And then I'd like you to just write what would have happened. Kind of go into the wish fulfillment, or if it's the story of doom. So it's, you know, it's a way to write about ourselves or write about our fixations, but to do it from the side. It's like a sneaky attack. And some of the questions to think of as you write this. So, you know, my mother should have stayed in Long Island. My father should have left Los Angeles in the 80s. You know, my grandmother should have never gone with my grandfather to Tijuana. Whatever it is. And once you have those sentences, think who wouldn't have been born if it happened this way? Who would have had to make a marriage work? Who would have been able to get divorced? Who maybe could have died in a freak accident, or who wouldn't have? How would that have changed our lives? In writing what didn't happen, we reveal slyly what did. So I don't want you to worry about writing anything that actually happened, unless you want to. But I'd really like to see you write all the things that should have happened or could have happened instead, if that makes sense. So let's just play around. I want to make sure too, I can't see everyone's face, but if anyone has any questions about this that you want to ask, I would love to hear it before I give us a couple minutes to try this out. Any questions?
It's kind of creepy. It's like you wouldn't have been born.
Yeah. Yeah, you're writing yourself out of existence.
Yeah.
But at the same time, right? Like, this is why I love nonfiction. You're never going to undo it, right? Like, all you do is you show how you understand your existence when you explore the possibilities of it not have being able to happen. If that makes sense. I think that's why we love those Back to the Future movies so much. You know, we all feel like we really know Marty McFly because we know how upset he gets when, you know, even his killer electric guitar solo starts to waver. Let's give it a shot. You know, I would say if you can, aim to get down between like 3 and 5 sentences. So nothing major, but we're just playing in this place of shoulds or coulds instead of in the place of dids. So I'm just gonna set a little timer. I'm gonna give us, I mean, real short, I'm gonna give us 5 minutes. We're just gonna see what happens. Just gonna see what happens. And then hopefully someone might be willing to share a sentence or two, either in the chat or out loud when we come back. So I'm just gonna set a little timer.
Okay. Okay. Got a writer. Come on.
All right, come on back. So I am, I think, going to, yep, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces, putting everyone in gallery. I'd love to hear how that was for y'all. If there was a sentence that popped up, if it gave you a space to maybe write about yourself or your life or your characters in a way that was less expected, and so kind of got to shake the box of puzzle pieces in your head a little bit more. Any feedback on that? And if anyone is willing to share any part of what they wrote, I'd love to hear it. Any takers? Yes, Gail.
Well, it definitely shook up my brain. I would never have conceived of writing what I wrote without the scenario you laid out. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Do you want to share part of it?
I could. Let's see. Now?
Yeah.
Okay. Grandfather should have stayed wherever it was he came from. If he had, Johnny would never have been born. Johnny with his cold, cold heart. Without Johnny, Billy would still be alive. Never mind the color of his skin. And I wouldn't have to spend the rest of my days with this broken heart, eyes too burned out by hot tears to see anything of life after that. I wonder, will Johnny burn in hell for what he did? No, I'm sure that place is too good for him.
Ooh, I love wherever it was he came from. That's such a good sort of, because I feel like if there's something in that ineffability, right? In not saying exactly where it is, it becomes worse than anything we can imagine. I love how you're able to conjure that. And then these names, Johnny and Billy and the cold, cold heart. I feel like I'm in kind of this magical Western, or almost like Rebel Without a Cause. It's this fantastic world of these kind of in some ways like star-crossed men, you know, who there's almost like East of Eden too, like brothers or relatives that have it out for each other. It's fantastic. It's so rich what you've already been able to evoke just in sort of shooting us into that sort of speculative space. Fantastic job, Gail.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to share or talk about the experience at all? Yes, Sean.
I have quite the map. It was kind of hilarious when you gave the original thing, and then so many thoughts about who went where, and I didn't even realize how many times over the generations people moved. But, and then I wrote about something that wasn't exactly on there. My mother should have stayed in Philadelphia. Yes, the store was failing and the rent was high, but from the letters I found in the basement, tucked behind the detritus of my parents' lives lived together, it was clearly a bad breakup. But they got back together, and Dad came back from Austin, and they took their honeymoon to the Grand Canyon, and then I was born.
Ooh, I love what you're doing there with that. See, this is, I can kind of be a little bit of a grammar nerd, and it's because of sentences like this where we have the and it like lays it out. And I get this image, because you've given it to me, of the detritus of the letters stored back there. And I see each detail of after they're get back together, all the things that happen is like one more letter kind of like falling out of this box that's been stuffed back there. I also love how you use that aside of yes, the store was failing. You kind of pull us in, right, with a sort of an intimacy that's really beguiling. And we feel like we too know the scenario here. And it's almost like we're getting cajoled back into this relationship as well. Yes, the store was failing. That's fantastic. And there's so much voice you're able to conjure so early on in this piece. Excellent. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for the prompt. Absolutely.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I think we have time for another. Yes, E. Seaton.
Name's Ellen.
Ellen, yes, please.
My dad should never have returned to Memphis after World War II. He didn't need to go back to Arkansas, but that was his chance to break free. He felt responsible for helping to care for his family. He returned to work in the funeral industry. That is when he committed suicide, all set up for him to meet his wife, my mother, at the funeral home. The marriage was fated from the beginning. My mother stayed in Memphis also. What else could she do with 3 small children?
Wow, you're able to bring us into such, I feel like the weight and the complication of this world on these 2 characters' shoulders. He didn't need to go back to Arkansas, but that was his chance to break free. Like one of the things I really enjoy in writing is that when pretty early on, it can tell me how high the stakes are. And if the stakes are high, I want to keep reading because I can't help it. I care about these people, even if I just met them a sentence ago, and I want them to be okay. And I think with this piece, we get a sense that these stakes are so high, and the idea of meeting people in the funeral home is so fantastically counter expectation. This is just, I feel like this is a kind of a historical novel that is begging to be written. These characters are just so complex and interesting already. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you all, if you want to put them in the chat, if you've got sentences there, I think we'd all love to see them. I am a little conscious of time, but I wanted to just say out loud a few more times some of the ideas of what we can do when we feel like we don't have the right to tell our story, or we're too boring to tell our story, or our story's too boring for us, or whatever it is. I just want to give this reminder, especially you hear it from hearing one another's stories. We don't just contain the stories we've lived. We contain all the stories we've imagined, right? We've contained all the stories we haven't lived. So there's no possible way you're not interesting enough. Because most of our life is lived in our head anyways, especially if you're an artist. And so I think like once we allow that as fair game, as our sort of archive of experience, everything we've imagined, everything that should have happened, everything that could have happened, as well as everything that literally did happen, we have so much material to pull from, and it's never going to not be interesting. But one of the things you can see from us sharing our work here is that we all sort of find electricity in one another's work. Something happens when these things are created and brought into the group. And I do think if you ever really feel like you've lost your way as a writer and are not excited to write, get in a group and play again. I really think that can make all the difference to reminding you how fun you are. And then the other things too are seek out these communities, find the secret artists around you. Remember, either within your family sharing stories or in your family of choice, sharing stories, sharing art, encouraging that kind of play. And then again and again, this good and bad it just doesn't serve us to evaluate art on that spectrum. And instead think about like, what would be the points on your sphere of value? Would a point be passion? Would a point be provocation? Would a point be accuracy? Would a point be audacity? What are the things you'd actually like to evaluate art based on instead of some old outdated notion of good and bad? Well, thank you for having me. This was wonderful. I love what y'all do here, and I'm just really flattered and delighted to get to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cait. Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful.
That was wonderful.
That's fantastic. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing all this information. And your passion and your personality, it was just fantastic. Thank you. I hope you'll put this in your wheelhouse to present to other groups as well.
I'd love to. And I also, if any of you are interested, Margot and I were talking about this earlier before the class started. I have a poetry workshop coming up that'll be really fun. It's called Relax, It's Just Poetry. And it's specifically for people who have psyched themselves out, either if you've done it like me by doing 8 years of higher education, or you've done it the other way by avoiding it at all costs. This should be a space where we can really play and get back to sort of the magic and fun of language.
Yes.
And because you're an honorary member for a year, you can also put events and classes and things that you are holding on our calendar. So, anyone on the board can help you if you have questions on how to do that, including Gail, who I think is going to get you set up as an honorary member.
Oh, thank you.
So I so enjoyed this. I loved, I really resonated with your point about deadlines. I used to think how I hated to have to be creative on a deadline. And then I found out that I really needed them.
Yeah.
That was great. Were there any questions or other comments for Cait before we get to our member sharing?
Yes, that would be me.
Okay, let me, hang on a second. I can't tell who me is at this.
Zita.
Zita.
Oh, okay. Zita, okay.
Yes, my question is for Cait. Now that you are an honorary member, would you be interested in being my partner for this year's collaboration?
Oh man, that didn't take long.
Wait. You don't have to tell right now. Think about it.
Yeah, I think I'd love to, but let's email. But it sounds great. I mean, everything y'all do at WiVLA is attractive to me. So yes.
Okay. We'll talk online.
Zita.
Right. Yes.
Boy,
Got
Zita.
myself in trouble here.
Yay, Zita.
Okay. And so any other comments other than, someone reaching out to snag the presenter for a collaboration?
If I thought about it too much, I wouldn't have asked.
Okay.
I noticed someone in chat just asked about where we can find your workshops, Cait. I assume that would be at your website.
Yeah, so the website is useful because the website, you can sign up for my newsletter. And then what's great is I send it out probably once every 2 or 3 months with information on upcoming classes and anything interesting like that. But I'll put the direct link to the newsletter sign up in the chat just in case, so it saves you a step.
Okay.
I just put her website in the chat.
Great, thank you, Margot.
Okay, perfect. Well, this was, I've just got like, I had really no room to write the sentences because I've got like notes just all over the place. So I really enjoyed this. Any other questions or comments or requests before we get to the member sharing?
Well, one thing I want to say that doesn't have to do with the program tonight, we have a brand new member who is here, who showed up during the presentation. It's Melissa Chambers.
I don't see.
Do you want
Oh,
to?
there she is. Hi, Melissa.
Where'd she go? Where'd she
Hey,
Maybe she's the lower.
how are
left-hand.
you?
Oh, there she is. Yes. She was, I remember you from our March meeting, Melissa.
Yeah,
And now
And,
she's a member. Yay.
I finally got
Welcome.
my act together and joined last week. It only took me 60 days, but who's counting?
Pretty fast. No?
But yeah,
That's pretty
this-
fast. Yeah.
That's
Well,
right.
welcome.
But no, really enjoyed tonight's presentation. It was awesome. Thank you, Cait.
Great.
Do you
Great.
want to tell us a little about yourself? Melissa?
Sure. Sure. My internet's acting a little weird, so hopefully this won't freeze on me. But yeah, I've been in marketing and communications for 25 plus years, and really kind of trying to morph into being more of just a creative writer rather than writing for products and B2B clients, really more self-expression. I do a little visual arts as well, mixed media and collage, but really want to focus on my writing and super excited about it. It's a sort of a scary leap. It's much easier when you're writing for a client and there's very specific goals in mind as opposed to just what's out of my head and my heart. But anyway, super excited about it. And I know being in a community like this, just seeing what other writers are doing, what other women are doing with their self-expression is, I know, going to be really helpful. So I'm excited to learn from you guys and get to know you.
Well, for myself, joining WiVLA was probably the best thing I ever did. So welcome.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it has been life-changing for some of us. So,
Yeah,
yes.
literally.
Expect to have a life-changing experience.
All right.
I just can't tell you when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I do know, but before we get into everyone talking about different events they've got going on, I wanted to hear from Lee Steiner.
Yes.
Lee, you had some information to share about an event.
And Joe was on tonight too, and she and I had a wonderful day today over at the Printing Museum. We met Kelly Anderson Staley over there. She has a show right now at the Printing Museum, which is, I'm showing you the back of the card too, but I'll give you more information. Raw materials. Kelly Anderson Staley is an associate professor of photography and digital media over at U of H. She's taught at a lot of different places. She just got a Guggenheim fellowship. So she's pretty hot right now. She's got a couple of other museum shows coming up, but Kelly has made these paper installations and artist books that are what's considered an unconventional autobiography. And she makes cyanotypes and what's the other, silver gelatin prints and other experimental printing and layering with silk screens and stuff. And it's just gorgeous. She made these paper quilts, and it tells her unconventional upbringing in a cabin with no off the grid with no electricity and no water and all this. And so it's a kind of revealing things about her life and her grandparents, her grandfather and her father's writings and things. So it's just fantastic. Like I said, it's a lot of layered cyanotypes and different prints. And we met Kelly over there today at the printing museum, and she gave Joe Zider and me a free tour of her exhibit and answered questions and told us about her life, and it was fantastic. Now this show is only open till May 28th at the printing museum. So and then the printing museum closes down because they're moving this summer. But Kelly has offered to meet us next week just for WiVLA members who want to come and walk through the exhibit free of charge before the museum opens. So it's a special like morning preview you get over at the printing museum, 10 o'clock Thursday, the 26th, not this Thursday, next week. She will meet us there, meet at the printing museum, and she'll give us a private tour. Joe, can you say something about what because Joe, as a printmaker, asked her lots of questions, but found her story fascinating. Joe, do you have something to add?
You're on mute, Joe.
Mute. You're muted.
Oh, unmute. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Kelly was not only does her work exhibit a wide range of craft. She knows her craft well. She does the cyanotypes, she does silk screening, digital art, photography, and she brings all this together in such a beautiful exhibition, which reveals so much personal history. And what really almost shocked me was how willing she was to reveal much about her own life. And if you have the time to see the exhibit and you can read the material, it's so rewarding, very rewarding.
So Lee, can you put something on our calendar?
Yes, I could do that. I will put it on the calendar. Yeah, Kelly, I just want to say she made these pieces from old letters, her grandfather's books, and personal letters and legal pad papers and things that have been in her family. So she has this massive archive. So she's put all this together. The printing museum, for anyone who doesn't know, it's 1324 West Clay. It's West Clay right off of Wa and West Gray. And like what we did is we went to lunch afterwards, and it was just lovely. But I think that Joe would agree. I mean, we got real insight into how these pieces were created by having the actual artist right there telling us her process. And I think it's something that, I'm glad that she's willing to meet us next week and provide WiVLA with this opportunity. So yes, I'll go on and I will I'll log in on the website, right? And add it to the calendar. But anyone who has any questions about it, I'll also, let me put my email in the chat, or you can reach me through the WiVLA directory, and you can ask me any questions about it. I mean, however many show up. I'm planning on being there. Joe may come again because Kelly's just so cool. And hope we get more of you guys. Okay, so I'm going to put my email here just in case you have questions, but I'll get it on the calendar tomorrow morning. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I do know that couple of our members have a reception coming up later this week.
Yes.
Whichever one of you can get off mute first and talk about it.
Okay, I win. I'm already unmuted. Okay. Me, Marie Casimir Harvey, wave, Marie. There she is. And another artist who is next door, her studio's next door to ours, Ricky Whitman, who does enamel work. We have partnered together to put on a show called Collage, Putting It Together. The opening reception is this Saturday, 5 to 8 in the silos. And we have a Facebook event page. And if you're on Facebook, just look up events for the 21st, next Saturday. It's Collage, Putting It Together. I'll also post it in the WiVLA members page.
It's already there.
Oh,
Marie
yes,
did that while you were lollygagging around the house. Yeah.
She is indeed the queen of publicity, let me tell you.
So I intend on going to the second hour of your reception before I head over to Hardy and Nance for their Plantasia exhibition, where I've got a piece. I've got a piece there. So, you know, you can just kind of go from one art event to another. And of course, you know, I've got 3 events on the same night, like probably most of us do. But yes, I will be there just to check out the wine. That's very exciting. That's very exciting.
It really is, yes. The show is already hung. I'm still working on the last few pieces, putting in the finishing touches on them, because when you have COVID, you don't feel like doing anything. But the show is going to be up through mid-August. And so maybe we can arrange for a private tour later on, but we can't promise wine later on. We will promise wine Saturday night.
It's so it's Gallery 200 in the silos.
Very, very great. That's wonderful, y'all. Anybody else have something going on? Any exhibitions or readings? Joe.
Anyone who is of the Jung Center, they have a show coming up called Visions, and I have a work that will be on exhibit in the group exhibit, and that opens March. What month is
May?
this?
Is
it? May 20, Thursday, next Thursday. Yes. So hope everybody can get out and see it. It's
okay.
quite.
So wait, the 20th. The 20th is a Friday.
Yes.
No, what is Thursday?
19.
Okay.
I also have a piece in that.
Okay.
And by Harriet. Well, I posted it on our Facebook page. Harriet Hair on Fire. So if anyone buys it, all the proceeds will go to the Jung Center.
And
yeah, good.
I also have a piece in the show, and the
right.
dates for it are, here's the actual dates, May 20th through June 29th. And the opening is going to be June 4th from 5 to 7.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know
So
that.
that's great. So you can go to the workshop earlier in the day and then head over to the reception. It's nice how these all dovetail. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Anyone else? For a second I thought Lane was raising her hand, but she's petting the cat. Donna.
I just want to say that unless I'm terribly confused, and I have been lately, but you know,
you look like you're having a hot flash.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome for that distraction. Well, yeah, okay. Archway Gallery Readers has been this August will have been going for 25 years, and that is a community of writers. And you know, I'm no longer myself really writing. And so Margot has really taken the lead on that now. And I just sort of am behind her a little, but it's pretty much her gig now. So yeah, and we have the next reading this Thursday, right, Margot? So, you know, if you're in need of, these are mostly poets, but not all. If you're a novelist, it's not a very good thing to just read 5 minutes with a group, but you know, so this is open to all genre, and it's a limited time, no more than 5 minutes.
But
I
if
think
you're
we have a
working
couple of spaces. I'm sorry, Ellen.
if you're working on character development for your stories, 5 minutes is great to throw out some ideas. And that's what I've been using poetry readings for, is just to try out ideas in a very short story, almost flash fiction.
So I've attended some of those on Zoom. I believe, don't you have some ekphrastic writing there as well? I mean, that's what put the bug in my bonnet.
Yes. My attitude now is whenever I go to a poetry reading, if I've got a piece of flash, I say, I'm reading it. I dare you to tell me not to. So I think flash and poetry are so, the boundaries are getting so loosey-goosey that I think as long as it fits within the time frame, it's all good. So there.
Who am I to argue? Okay, anyone else? Well, this was a fabulous evening. Cait, again, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of your work at our collaboration.
I wanted to.
Yes,
I'm
Gail.
sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. I didn't mean to.
I just took a breath, but go ahead.
Okay, you go ahead and then I'll go. You finish and then
No, I was going to close out the meeting. So
oh,
go ahead.
okay. Well, I'm glad I butted in then, because I wanted, with so many guests here, I wanted to make sure everyone knew that this program, if you want to hear it again, I want to go back through and refresh my notes. It'll be available on our YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
Right, Melody?
Yes, it will. Yes.
Okay.
I've been a little slow to getting them out there. But yeah, give me a few days to get the recording edited and up on our YouTube channel. So what I do is, if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get a notification right away. If not, and you're a member, it goes on our member, in our WiVLA member group page. And members can always share that link with non-members. So,
So is that channel only available to members? If you go into YouTube and search for WiVLA, anybody can get. Yeah.
Yes, anybody can subscribe to the channel. It's the Facebook group that is restricted to members. Okay. Any last minute announcements before we close for the evening? Okay.
Been great. What a great meeting.
It has been a fabulous meeting. I'm sorry, I was fixated on Joe Sider there for a second. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know. Yes, gentlemen. Thank you so much for attending to this evening's meeting. And I look forward to seeing y'all again next month, or maybe some of you in a couple of weeks, maybe sooner. Y'all have a great
next Thursday.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's like,
Next
it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I mean, it's just so many opportunities.
Y'all are
We have
all
a
going
lot.
to be together at my reception on
Yes.
Saturday.
And mine. So yes, look at the calendar. Look at the calendar. It's full of little colored blocks.
Yeah.
All right, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Cait.
so much.
Thank
I
you
loved
again,
it.
Cait.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.